There is a filing cabinet in the Library of Congress holding voices of Americans, not audio recordings, but thousands of pages of handwritten and typed interviews. They were conducted between 1936 and 1940 by federal researchers across 24 states. Their mission was simple: collect ordinary citizens' stories before they were gone forever. The program was the Federal Writers Project. Part of Roosevelt's New Deal initiative, it employed journalists, novelists, and researchers to document real, everyday American lives. Nearly 2,900 life histories were gathered and filed in the Library of Congress. These documents sat mostly unread for decades, quietly waiting for someone to discover. I found them while researching 19th century architectural records from the 1870s. I wanted to understand why many public buildings seemed oddly oversized for ordinary people. The deeper I went, the more it became clear. The people were the real story. These interviews captured memories textbooks could never convey. Stories of lives long gone. Americans alive before the big transitions remembered events differently than history books claim. Consider an American born in 1855, living to 85 years old by 1940. They were children during the 1860s and 1870s, witnessing dramatic changes firsthand. Their grandchildren, born in the 1920s, heard these stories passed down in kitchens. That generation is almost gone, leaving only transcripts of their memories behind today. Mary Kelly, born 1851 in Southfield, Michigan, lived to 111. Dying in 1964, she was born before the Civil War and lived to see televisions in homes. Maggie Barnes, born to a formerly enslaved woman in the 1880s, lived until 1998. These weren't exceptions. Hundreds lived past 90, dozens past 100 years old. The government recorded only a portion, 2,900 accounts, before the program ended in 1939. Next, consider October 8, 1871, the night the Great Chicago Fire devastated the city. Few realize that massive fires occurred simultaneously across Wisconsin and Michigan the same night. The Peshtigo Fire destroyed an entire town in about 1 hour, killing thousands. It burned 1.2 million acres. With winds strong enough to lift adults off ground, flames moved faster than people could run, and heat consumed some instantly without touching. Reverend Peter Perrin survived by submerging himself in the Peshtigo River. He described fire behavior unlike any normal wildfire, where air itself seemed deadly. Other Michigan towns, including Holland and Manistee, were also destroyed that same night. Official reports blamed drought, debris, and high winds. But simultaneity puzzled researchers. A comet fragments hypothesis emerged in 1883 and was revisited in later investigations. Eyewitnesses reported blue flames in basements, suggesting unusual chemical combustion rather than wood. Whether true or not, children who lived through it remembered the red sky vividly. Elderly Americans interviewed in the 1930s had been 3 to 13 years old, then the Library of Congress. Documents describe surviving the Chicago fire and pioneer experiences, but the full picture, including simultaneous fires and eyewitness details, was mostly lost. Fires were not the only records lost. The 1890 census was nearly erased entirely. It included detailed information about 62.9 million Americans, more comprehensive than ever before. Unlike previous censuses, no local backups were kept. Everything was stored centrally in D.C. in 1921. A fire destroyed roughly 25% of the records, damaging many more. For 12 years, surviving records were neglected. With no restoration or duplication attempts in December 1932, the Librarian of Congress was asked to identify documents worth preserving. The 1890 census was deemed unnecessary. Congress authorized destruction in February 1933. The next day, President Hoover laid the cornerstone of the National Archives, too late. Of 62.9 million names, only about 6,160 records survived for future researchers. This eliminated the most detailed record of Americans alive during the transformative decades. Meanwhile, between 1854 and 1929, roughly 250,000 children were sent west on orphan trains. Many weren't actual orphans. Names were changed, family connections severed, origins forgotten. These children grew up disconnected from their history, never able to tell their grandchildren. The timing of these events is precise. Orphan trains, fires, photographs, and census destruction. Giant photographs stopped appearing in the late 1800s. Maps quietly redrawn. Skeleton reports vanished in 1893. Chicago hosted the world's Columbian Exposition, attracting millions of visitors over months. Over 200 grand buildings stretched across 630 acres. Constructed with hand tools, horse-drawn equipment, massive neoclassical domes, columns, and sculptures rose in under 2 years. With precision unmatched after 6 months, nearly every building was demolished, leaving only the fireproof Palace of Fine Arts. Children and young adults interviewed in the 1930s remembered walking through these impossible structures. They saw something older, grander, and permanent. Unlike the America textbooks described around them by the 1950s, the last Americans born in the 1850s and 1860s were dying women and men who had witnessed transitions shared. Stories with grandchildren at home and porches. Stories of buildings ancient in their youth, nights with red skies, and trains full of children, grandchildren, often nodded politely. Their textbooks did not match these living memories from elders. Some voices were captured. 2,900 documents from 24 states in the Federal Writers Project. But what about the other 24 states and thousands never interviewed or recorded? These stories passed through kitchens, front porches, and deathbeds, and are nearly gone today. Grandchildren are now in their 80s and 90s. The human chain of memory fades. The Library of Congress still holds those 2,900 carefully preserved interviews. It's publicly accessible since the 1970s archives do not forget. Even when people do, preserving memories erased from schools and records. Depression-era federal workers recorded these Americans' recollections in careful handwriting. Preserving what textbooks erased, they captured stories about architecture, firestorms, lost identities, orphan trains. In a world now vanished, the last witnesses are gone, their grandchildren are almost gone, yet archives hold the truth. Somewhere in those 2,900 transcriptions lies what actually happened. Waiting for someone willing to read not what we were told to remember, but what was truly lived and experienced firsthand. The buildings remember, even if we don't. The documents preserve what encyclopedias erased entirely, and so, the story waits, almost a century old, for anyone brave enough to uncover it.